In the last video, I ended by saying that I wanted to show some arguments for why believing in God makes sense, rationally speaking. And that's what we will start doing now in this video. And so I will discuss one of the many arguments that have been given through history for the existence of God. But before doing that, I have to warn you about something, and it's that a lot of times when I talk with atheists or my friends ask me questions about my faith, sometimes the question you get is, give me the argument for the existence of God. Show me the irrefutable argument that you have to believe in God, and if I agree, then I will perhaps consider becoming Christian or believing in God, whatever, but show me an argument I cannot break down. And so I have to disappoint you if you were coming for this video for such an argument, that I think there is no such a thing as the argument for the existence of God. In the sense that I show you a reasoning, and after hearing it, either you accept the existence of God or you are stupid. You don't understand the argument. I don't think there is such a thing. I do think that you can know with certainty that God exists. This is even one article of Catholic faith, very striking to think about it, but I do think you can know with certainty, but the certainty that you have of the existence of God is not the same certainty that you have in mathematics, in a proof of mathematics. It's a bit different. It's the same certainty that you would get, I think, if you would ask someone, how do you know that your wife loves you? So someone can have certainty, I know my wife loves me, someone can say. But then you can ask, how do you know it? Give me the arguments. And this person, he can start saying things like, well, because when it's my birthday, she makes the best cake that I like the most, and when I'm sick, she takes care of me, and when I'm tired, she smiles, whatever. You can give some reasons, but none of these reasons, standing alone, is like a waterproof argument that your wife loves you. It could still be that she's doing that because she wants to ask something else, or she's pretending that she loves you, or whatever. There is not a proof, but nevertheless, because of a whole bunch of experiences in your life and from all the knowledge that you can have this certainty. Your wife loves you. I'm certain about it. So I would say it's a bit the same with knowing that God exists. There is not such a thing as the waterproof argument, that the irrefutable, no criticism possible, but it's a combination, it's a synthesis that you make of arguments and life experiences and like everything that you start seeing that it points towards God. Concerning this, I would like to give a quote by author C.S. Lewis, which I think it's quite interesting. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. So thanks to the sun you can see all the rest, and that's why that can be one reason for knowing the sun is there. And so it's the same, I think, with believing in God. Once you realize the existence of God, you see that a lot of things in your life are like pieces in a puzzle. They start fitting together, and a lot of separated things start making sense. So that's at least how I see it. Perhaps it's nonsense to you what I'm saying, but that's what I see, how I see it. So it's a synthesis that you make of your whole life, but also of rational arguments. And so, having said this, what we are going to discuss now is one such rational argument. Good. So I'm not a philosopher. As I said, I'm a scientist. I study physics, so I have an interest in philosophy, but I'm not a professional philosopher at all. So perhaps things that I will say are nonsense. So you have to be a bit critical. But at least what I will discuss is an argument coming from philosophy, which I like, and I think I can explain it a bit. So we'll see. It's I think this argument is a bit based, it's not exactly the same, but it's based on the third way of Thomas Aquinas. just of Saint Thomas Aquinas, a big philosopher in the Christian tradition, who gave in his Summa Theologica, his book, his most known work about theology, he gave 5 arguments for the existence of God. And he didn't call them proofs of God's existence. That's also something I like. He called them vias, no? Ways to get to God. And so this one, the argument I will discuss, it's based on the third way. You can find modern expositions of this argument, and one book I would recommend for this is a book called 5 Proofs, use the word proof, but okay, 5 Proofs of God's Existence by Edward Facer. I think it's a very nice book, no? Where you have these arguments for the existence of God really detailed in steps and with several possible criticisms. So if you are more interested in this, that's a good reference, I think. And so the argument that I propose, it starts by remarking that on all the concepts that we have of reality, on all the things that we know about our universe, we make a difference between the essence and the existence of things. Okay, so what do I mean by this? If you look at a table, no, you can say, well, after seeing several tables, I can make an abstraction and reach what we can call the essence of a table. Now, why do I call this thing a table? And why is it not a cow or a window or something? So what makes a table a table? That is the essence of the table. You could say, loosely speaking, this is what you would find in a dictionary, no? the definition, no? the essence of a table. And then to have the essence, but then when you look at a concrete table, it's not only it is a table, but also it exists. No? The existence of a thing is the fact that it is. And in general, the two things don't go together. No? So you can think of a lot of tables who actually do not exist in reality. It's something else, the essence and the existence. And you have tables who do exist. No? You can even, to show that the essence and the existence are different things, you can also realize that we can conceive of beings, no, of essences, that actually there is not a single realization of it. You can think of a unicorn, no, and define a unicorn, but that doesn't mean that it exists in reality. No? So the essence is what something is, and the existence is the fact that it is. No? So the beings whose existence is not implied by its essence, so beings that can or cannot exist, it's not illogical to think of this being as non-existent or as existent. These beings, we call them contingent beings in philosophy. So beings, Thomas Aquinas, in his argument, he calls them possible beings, beings that may or may not exist. Right? And so since for contingent beings the existence is not implied by its essence, you can ask yourself, why does this being exist? No? This table, why does it exist? Where does it come from? What is causing its existence? And the cause of the existence of a contingent being has to be something else, another being. It cannot be itself, because then the existence would be implied by its essence. And we are saying a contingent being is a being which may or may not exist. The existence is not implied by the essence. So to understand why one contingent being exists, you need another being, okay, which is the cause of its existence. And then you can ask yourself, okay, if I say this being, let's say being A, exists because of being B, why does B exist? You can ask yourself that question. Okay? And then if B itself is also contingent, then you will need another being to explain the existence of B. You see? Let's say C. And then with this other being that you are posing as an explanation for B, you can ask yourself again, why does it exist? And then you see, so here several things can happen. One is that you keep on going to infinity. This exists because of this, that exists because of that, and you keep on going. But then if you never end this chain, you are left, no, in your inquiry process with the same. You are not definitely or ultimately explaining the existence of the first being. We are just only pushing the problem forward. No? And you are making even the problem worse, because now you not only have one being to explain its existence, now you have a lot of beings whose existence you have to explain, because you are not you have not reached the final explanation of why all these other things exist. So the only way in which you could, I would say, ultimately explain the existence of one contingent being is if somewhere in this chain you reach as explanation for the existence of the other beings one being which is not contingent, one being whose existence is in fact implied by its essence, a being which sometimes in philosophy is called necessary. It cannot not exist. No, it's illogical to think of this being as non-existent. The existence is part of its essence. A being which is not caused by something else, but which in itself has their own explanation for its existence. So such a being we call in philosophy a necessary being. And so what we are arguing is that in order to account for the existence of contingent beings, as the ones we see in our universe, tables, cows, whatever, there must be, if we want to be able to explain it, there must be at least one necessary being, a being which cannot not exist. This is the essence of the argument. The essence, okay, sorry for using that word so much, but this is the main point of the argument through contingency, you know, to show there must exist a necessary being which cannot not exist. And this being we call God. No? And why would we call it God? Well, then you can go further and argue, well, if a being is necessary, it cannot be material, it cannot be temporal. There are a lot of arguments, no, that you can still make to show, you know, this being which explains the existence of all the rest is really aphysical, atemporal, and so forth. And so it corresponds to the idea that philosophers have of God. But for me, the one reason, which is of course not the ultimate reason, but which I like, is it has to do with my favorite passage in the Bible, in the Old Testament, which is Exodus Pi, the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verse 14. Right? And there, so in this passage, you see that there is Moses talking with God, and God is asking Moses to go to the Pharaoh, no, of Egypt and ask for setting all the Israelites, the people of Israel, free. And Moses, of course, he says to God, like, you know, if I go to the Pharaoh and I ask this, he's going to laugh at me, no, like, who am I, no, who is sending you? He's going to ask me, who sends you to tell me this, to demand this? And so he asked to God, who are you? No, what should I answer to the Pharaoh? Who are you? He asks to God. And then God gives the following answer. This is Exodus Pi, Exodus chapter 3, 14. He says, I am the one who is. No, I am what I am. No, Yahweh, not the name of God. I am. So you see, and this corresponds to the philosophical concept, no, in the Christian tradition of God as the pure being. No, it's the necessary being. It's something that exists, whose existence, it is the only being whose existence is equivalent to its essence. The two are the same. That the essence of God is being. Right. So that's why, at least it can go towards that direction. Why do we say that the necessary being is God? Well, here you have a hint of it. Good. Here, so okay, this is the argument. No, of course, I've explained it shortly. You can look for other references and think about it and so forth. There are, of course, criticisms, a way of criticizing this argument. It's not a waterproof argument. But like you could ask Noah, give me more precise definitions of contingent and causality and all these things. Okay, you can criticize a lot. But one thing that is said very often, and which for me is really no criticism, is the following. If you read The God Delusion, in a book by Richard Dawkins, where he criticizes the arguments of Thomas Aquinas, there he says, all of these arguments rely upon the idea of a regress, what I was saying, that this is caused by this and this is caused by this, and invoke God to terminate it. They make the entirely unwarranted assumption that God himself is immune to the regress. So this is, they make the unwarranted assumption that God is immune to the regress. This is the typical question that is very popular on the internet, and who he also asks, who created the creator? So you can say this, who created God? If you ask God, if you have God as explanation for the rest, who created God? And you might think that this is an intelligent thing to say, but it's completely ridiculous. It's nonsense. It's like you have failed to understand the very point of the argument. The argument tries to show that there must be a being which is not created, and that being we call God. But it's the whole argument is showing that such a being must exist. It's the conclusion. It's not the assumption. Right? So if you want to criticize it, you may criticize the argument, but don't say nonsense like this, like who created the creator. It's the whole point of the argument to show that there must be something which is not created, and that you call God. No? Okay, I say it because this is used a lot. No, also typical cafe conversations with a beer. No, who created God? You think you are saying something intelligent? It's nonsense. It's really nonsense. Good. And well, last remark before I finish this video is this argument, as you see, it leaves you with a very abstract notion of God. No? So from there to Christianity, there is a long way to go. I'm not saying after this, I've shown the case for Christianity. Not at all. We are left with a very abstract concept of God. But I think it's the first step, realizing there is some immaterial being there, which is the cause of our existence. From there, you can further inquire to reality and ask yourself questions. This is like the first step. And to get from there to Christianity, I mean, one thing that I would recommend you is read the Gospel. Let God speak to you through the Gospel. Read the life of Jesus Christ. I think there is, just like in history, there is a before and an after Jesus Christ. There is in the life of every person, there can be a before and after encountering Jesus Christ. This is so try to get to know Jesus Christ. Read his life, read what he did, and try to think, does it make sense to think that this guy was more than merely a good philosopher or prophet or whatever, but he was the Son of God. This is a task that I cannot do it with you. You should try it. And well, for the next videos, what I'm going to discuss is two usual objections that people make to the existence of God, which are actually the ones that Thomas Aquinas discusses in his book. Like in the second question, in the Summa Theologica, he says, there are two reasons why it seems that God does not exist. First of all, the existence of evil. Why is there evil in the world? If God is so good and powerful, how come there are evil and there is suffering and so forth? And the second reason he gives for why it looks like as if God does not exist is the fact that we can explain a whole lot of things in our universe without referring to God, just through natural sciences. It seems as if we don't need God to explain the world. So these are the two main objections that Thomas Aquinas discusses, and these are the ones that we'll discuss in the next videos. So see you there.